Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 259 of the Board Game Barrage podcast. I am back in the U.S. of America. That's how they say it here. And I'm glad to be here. Hello, everyone.
Hey.
How are you all doing?
Glad to have you back on your home soil.
Yeah, somewhat. Feels weird. It's kind of bizarre being out of the country for 2 months and then trying to resume what was your normal life.
Yeah, I got a call from Uncle Sam asking if you defected.
Yeah.
And they had me do a little investigation, which is why I went to your apartment and knocked over your paintings.
That does explain the military escort at the airport, so thank you for that. We are back with the top 50 greatest board games of all time. This is the fourth installment of 5. That means we are on the number 20th to 11th best games of all time. Some may be wondering why this is not clearly recorded inconsistently with the previous 3 episodes. And the reality is we listened back to the last 2 episodes and we were just so slurring all of our words. It was a mess. So we just figured we'd just redo it for the better for all of you. Just to reiterate some rules off the top of the head, we are giving ourselves 1 minute to talk about each of our games. So to get straight to the heart of why we love them. So without further ado, let's get right into it. We're going to start off with Kellen's 20th best game of all time.
So I think this might be my highest riser for the year. And so many party games and dexterity games never rise above the label in my mind of novelty game. A novelty game being something that you can play 1 or 2 times or 3 times that you like showing to each new group of people, but that ultimately doesn't have sort of that substance underneath it. And for me and my money, So Clover has risen dramatically through the rankings of my party games. This has taken over the de facto codenames spot for me as a group shared word game where you are trying to guess each other's words. What's great about So Clover is that everyone is thinking simultaneously and coming up with their clues, and then everyone is solving them together. I adore this game, and if anyone is asking for a party game recommendation and they do not have it, it will always be So Clover.
Love So Clover. This was on my list last year. It just slipped off the bottom this year, but only if you do lack of play. I adore it. Excellent family party game.
Yeah, for such a crowded field as clever word games have been recently, and how hard it is to really emerge from that pack of really good games, So Clover does feel to me like head and shoulders above a lot of that new crop of games.
So my 20th favorite game of all time is a double crossover with Mark, who would have spoken about in the previous episode. This is Reiner Knizia's Blue Lagoon. This is one of my absolute favorite Knizia games. There's something that's just so dead simple about it. On your turn, you're just placing a person somewhere connected to your previous chains, sort of moving out from boats towards collecting resources. But there are a bunch of different competing objectives. It's not just about collecting resources. It's about creating a long chain, connecting islands, or just establishing majority on each of these islands. So there are these multiple things that you're in competition for with other players. And the thing that's so devious about the resource collection is that there are very specific sets of them that will reward points. So you can see across the table to what Kellen is going for and go out of your way to block him. Almost kind of like Go style, not quite as similar to that as something like Through the Desert, but very much in the same vein. Absolutely beautiful interactive game from the good Dr. Blue Lagoon.
You used a word there, Neilan, that I'd reiterate, and that was dead. And this game became dead when Reiner Knizia replaced it with the superior Babylonia. So good on you for at least acknowledging that this is a dead game.
That's harsh.
Very harsh.
I really love Blue Lagoon, just to be Blue Lagoon.
And Babylonia is actually one that really wanted to revisit in 2022 and just never got the chance to. But I owe it more plays. I've still only played it that once, but that's a solid game as well, for sure. Mark, tell us about number 20.
So, Neilan mentioned So Clover slipping off of his list. A game that slipped off of my top 50 was Rising Sun, but it has been replaced by another Eric Lang game, and that is Blood Rage. Blood Rage was a game that I have enjoyed over the years, but never really cracked my top 50, as is a theme with a lot of games in my top 50. Getting a chance to play it a lot more this year, primarily through BGA, but also in person a number of times, including a great game with Walker and one of our listeners, Leland, at Shucks. Just reiterated how much I enjoy Blood Rage. I love the simplicity of it. I love the big moments of battle where you have all these big plastic pieces doing a big fight, but the combat is really simple and straightforward. No dice rolling. It's based on the information you have and the information you can sort of glean from what your opponents might have drafted. Just a great troops on the map game. One of my favorites. And yeah, I think Eric Lang's greatest design, Blood Rage. Number 20 and new to my list.
I have to admit, Mark, I feel like I had a weird curve with Blood Rage, and right now it's on the low a little bit for me. Based on like some recent games of it, I still think for my money Rising Sun is my favorite of the trilogy. Blood Rage is one of those games I feel like just vacillates so hard between a game that I just really can't stand of it and one that really brings out what is great about it. But riding that line is really hard for me.
The thing I've liked about multiple plays of it is that, and this is the case with a lot of board games that have a lot of information on the cards, the first couple times you play it, even though you are seeing all the cards as you're drafting them, you're not really like internalizing what they are and you don't really know what is possible. But after playing it a number of times now, I have a sense of like what the potential plays my opponents could be going after could be, and then I can plan ahead, and I sort of actually, when the drafts are coming up, I can actually do a little bit of hate drafting. I can do a little bit of counter drafting now that I have like a better grasp of the overall like card set and possibilities.
It's funny because that game of Blood Rage just solidified my decision to remove it from my top 50.
Right.
It's such a good game, but oh man, I feel like you can be out in the first age and it may not even be your fault, and that's too much. But the more you know the cards, the better you play, certainly. And so some of that is on me to get good, as the kids say. All right, my 19th favorite board game of all time has fallen out of, I believe, my top 10 from years past. I feel like if you say that you like area control, it's sort of like a secret club. If you don't utter the words El Grande within your first couple of sentences, you're escorted out the back and you're never allowed into club area control again. El Grande is a fantastic area control experience that gets out of the way and lets you focus on what it is, which is area control, and frankly, an auction, right, where you're choosing what card to use at what time and how important it is that you do the thing that you want to do right now. Things just start bothering me. The Castillo just bothers me. It just bothers me just enough with that hidden trackable information.
The Castillo has fallen?
The Castillo, it's still alive in my heart. And again, if anyone asks, El Grande, you know what I'm saying? Like, if ever there's a code to get into the club, I can say the words El Grande, right? I can pronounce it right. This isn't Crascaria, El Grande, right? I've lived by Mexico my entire life. El Grande, my 19th favorite board game of all time.
This is a double crossover with me from the last episode, where keen-eared listeners will remember that El Grande also slipped for me down 9 spots. So, yeah, I mean, I still think it's a fantastic
You can still say El Grande.
I still know that the password is El Grande.
El Grande.
Sort of like Fidelio for those who know certain movies, but
don't know.
Eyes wide shut.
El Grande.
Very different clubs, those, Mark.
Very different clubs.
Notice Neilan hasn't said it. Neilan hasn't said it.
I wish I liked El Grande more. That's
he's not in the club.
How dare you say El Grande?
You can't get in the Board Gamers Club or the Eyes Wide Shut Club.
My 19th favorite game of all time is my favorite Stefan Feld game. This is going to probably be anathema to most Feld fans, but it is the Oracle of Delphi. It's up 2 spots this year based on having played it a couple of times in person. I've played it a fair bunch of times online in the previous years, but was reminded playing it in person just how wonderful a presentation it is and just how much I enjoy it. It's effectively a race game where you're completing objectives and then heading back to the start, but it's ultimately a dice mitigation game where the dice that you roll prior to your turn are going to determine the actions you can take based on their colors. Importantly, there's a lot of ways to mitigate those dice rolls, and accumulating the means to mitigate them and finding viable alternative paths and not beholding yourself to one specific path that the dice are going to determine is going to be the way to ultimately win this. Fantastic game. Absolutely love it. As the Oracle of Delphi.
I need to play this again. It's been a while since I played it. All right. Let's get flavorful. Let's get historical. Pax Renaissance has slipped off my list. Pax Porfiriana I need to play, especially after Kellen's previous glowing review. But a game that has stayed on my list and is actually up 5 spots is Pax Pamir 2nd Edition. I mentioned historical. I mentioned flavorful. I am a sucker for games that are historically themed. I'm a sucker for games that have interesting flavor text. Pax Pamir has both. But on top of that, it also has a really solid, really interesting area control tableau building aspect to it that the PAX games all share the sort of card row thing where you're buying cards to your tableau, and the way you do them is on a card row where cards get cheaper and cheaper the longer they've been on the row, so that's a common thread. But PAX Premier has an interesting sort of geographic tableau aspect to it, where you're building your tableau, but the ends of your tableau are sort of connected to your opponents, and there is, again, a geographic consideration to make about where you place your cards and how you're going to move them around. Just an interesting game. The way that the board is manipulated is also interesting, where pieces can sort of become different things. And the production for the second edition is incredible with the cloth map and I don't know what the pieces are made of, but there's some sort of like, I don't know, clay-like thing, but just a beautiful production, really interesting game. And as I've always said, it's a game where I don't care if my turns take a long time to get back to me, because I'm happy to read about all these characters from history and love that game. So PAX Premier second edition, my 19th favorite game of all time, up 5 spots.
I would like PAX Premier better if it were like generic without a theme. Traders in the Mediterranean.
I wonder how far it would fall for me if it was themeless. I think I still would have it in the top 50, but the theme is a big part for me.
I'm sad to hear about PAX Renaissance, because that is the one that I most want to play, just because it gets out of the way and is so like short.
Yeah, right. Sure.
One of the things that my 18th, every time I have a game, I have to have the story attached to it. It's about the story. One of the things that I've been thinking about a lot this year is the stress of life and how that impacts the games that you want to play. I had one of the most stressful work years of my life, very rewarding, but very harsh. And as a result, Time's Up has slipped further down my top 20 list. This is a party word game that is extremely stressful when you play it with our group of friends. It is the same game as Monikers, except better. I did play Monikers this year, so I can confidently say that. But again, the way that we play it is with an app that isn't even something that you can get, so I feel bad saying it. But this is a game where the first round, you can give as many clues as you want. The second round, you can only give one word. And the third round, you can't say anything. The highs are very high with Time's Up, but the stress is very real. And I find myself, when I'm in the party game mood, to not want to add that dollop of stress and adrenaline, because I must win when I play Time's Up. And it is very defeating when you lose Time's Up, and very elating. Can one elate? I don't know. Causes elation.
Yeah.
Right? Time's Up, my 18th favorite board game of all time.
I can see, for as much as I like Time's Up, I can see, like, if you were in a stressful mood, not being interested in playing it. But I do think that's our group problem. Like, it's funny because I know that you are a competitive guy in general, but I don't think like you are necessarily like hell bent on winning every game you play. But I know that when we play Time's Up, that is ratcheted up. And I don't know if that's the case with all groups. I think it's one of the things that makes Time's Up great in our group. But I don't know, Time's Up becomes like some sort of like blood feud when we play it. It's like, yeah, we're playing a game. Kellen won this game. Neilan won this game. But like, when Time's Up happens and the teams get divvied up, there's like some sort of like weird, like, again, like blood pact that happens. Like, okay, these are now my brothers and sisters, and we must defeat the other team no matter what. At least that's how I feel. It's like we step into like an alternate reality where it's like,
there's pride on the line.
Yeah,
it's like,
right.
I want the people on my team to say, oh, Kellen is the kind of guy we need on this team.
No, I guess. Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? It's like a schoolyard pick, and you're just like,
yes,
all these better know that they've got a ringer.
Right.
And thy name is Kellen.
I agree, for sure.
My 18th favorite game of all time is probably going to get a lot of people very angry. This is a new entry for my top 50. This is Blood on the Clocktower.
What?
It seemed appropriate given like this is the official release year of the game, despite me having played it a couple of times in previous years. But I don't think any experience has come close to a couple of games of Blood on the Clocktower this year. Most notably, the first game I played this with a retail copy where we had an incredibly large group of mixed company and friends in an outside space and lovely environment. And then secondly, the first time I was the storyteller in this game. I think those two games really sealed for me just how incredibly unique an experience of this can be in the right circumstances. I think the problems that people have with Blood on the Clocktower don't generally bother me as long as I'm having a good time playing it. Like, it can be wonky in some of the decisions the storyteller has to make, but ultimately it's still an experience that just isn't met by any other games that I have played. That is Blood on the Clocktower.
I have a lot of experience as well with Blood on the Clocktower this year, and I don't begrudge you, Neilan, for having it this high on your list. I will say it has had tremendous experiences. I will say that all social deduction games in this ilk, including the Resistance, are sort of just the same game with a limited shelf life, and Blood on the Clocktower has just injected some newness into that. So I totally get it. And if our friend said, let's have a monthly Blood on the Clocktower night, I would look forward to it for probably 6 months, the next 6 months. But I will say the setup and the burden of being the storyteller is insane. It is not something to take lightly. It's expensive, it is annoying, it is hard to set up, and there's a lot of burden on you, having done that experience myself.
Yeah, no, and I will definitely not counter any of that. There are a few things I found as stressful in my board gaming career as doing that role, in terms of just like making sure you were messing up anything with the setup and just like how much management there is to get right. But I kind of enjoyed it. It felt like a good sort of stress to me.
Yeah, I enjoyed trying to make it as fun as possible in that sort of way where like you're trying to do big plays or big splashy moves. It's like, how can I set this up so that it is as funny as possible? And then during the game, how can I make it as, like, in my mind, swingy as possible was what my goal was. But again, that's a third-party force exerting into your competitive experience. This is no Resistance.
My 18th favorite game of all time is the re-emergence or reappearance by the Doctor himself, and this is also a crossover, a double crossover in our parlance, with Neilan. This is Raw. So this is part of the Knizia auction trilogy. There's a lot to love about Raw. Again, it's an auctioning game. The auctions itself and what you're bidding for is pretty straightforward. The way that you score isn't necessarily that novel. There is some interesting aspects to that, but the thing I like the most about it is the way you're bidding. You have these tokens that are, I think, from 1 to 16 or something like that, and every round you'll have 3 of them, and there's one instance of each one, and each round you're going to bid with them. Among the things that you're bidding for is the bidding chip that was used in the previous round. So there's this constant thing about, you know, I use my high token to win this lot, but maybe the actual token I'm going to get for the next round is a lower one. So there's that give and take for it. Also, while the way that the scoring may be a little simplistic and not necessarily super novel or clever, it is straightforward. So there's not a lot of trying to figure out how things score. It's just interesting and clever enough to make it something to consider and look forward to, but not so clever that it's hard to sort of understand. So my 18th favorite game of all time is the Knizia classic Raw.
By the power of Raw. You know the reference? May want to go back to your animated movies.
By the power of Raw? I mean, this is from my homeland. This is.
I mean, I don't remember the next line of the song, so I won't sing it to you, but...
Do you know By the Power of Grayskull?
I don't.
Sounds like Neilan knows.
I do. Oh, do you genuinely not know that, Kellen? I guess
no.
That makes sense. Okay, that makes sense, though.
I don't.
We won't tell him, though.
What is it, a Beatles thing? It doesn't sound like Beatles, but when in doubt, it's Beatles. My number 17th favorite board game of all time is another in the card game that is actually a party game genre, occupied with Fuji Flush, and this is Six Nimmt! My favorite thing about Six Nimmt is playing it with Mark and Neilan while they both say there's no skill in this game, and then I proceed to mercilessly beat them over and over again and laugh at them. There are many attempts at newer versions of this, even Reiner Knizia doing some of his games like Puma Mafiosa and Hot Lead that are all in this realm of sort of playing cards, trying to win sort of semi-blind, not auctions, because not everything is an auction game. If you're looking for a small box card game that is uproariously funny, that can have a wide scale of a player range, and you don't care so much who wins as sort of the tactics of trying to get through a round with the least damage to yourself, Six Nimmt is one of the first games that I would pull out. Just a marvelous little box of a card game.
Two things. Two personal
I accept
things.
one thing.
First of all, you're mixing me up with Neilan. Neilan is the Six Nimmt sucks. You're a child for enjoying it. I do think there's some skill to it. And number two, I'm not going to put you on blast, as the kids say, but I've looked up your stats on my BG.
No, you haven't.
And you don't have as high a win rate in Six Nimmt as you might believe.
In my mind, it's above 90%.
Okay. In reality, I will say it's much less than that.
Are you taking away one of my top 20 games, Mark?
I'm not doing that. I enjoy Six Nimmt quite a bit.
Don't yuck someone's yum.
Way more than Neilan, who has a 0% win rate. Neilan has 0 wins.
0% win rate.
0%, and that's why he hates it.
We can
bad.
ally around that, right?
Not a little bit true.
That's right, exactly.
Yeah, we're agreed.
My 17th favorite game of all time is down 5 spots, and that is Scythe. It's weird that I sometimes ask myself why I like Scythe, but then when I try to describe it, I think it kind of sells itself a little bit to someone like me, which is to say that, like, it's 4X adjacent. It's definitely not a 4X game, but it captures some of what I like about that genre. Yes, thank you, Kellen. But it does a good job of feeling Ameritrashy a little bit, but being very sort of like deterministic Euro, with the exception of the exploration, which adds a little bit of a random bend to it. But ultimately, it's an action efficiency puzzle. And I love that about it. And I know that's the thing that a lot of people will say is this biggest detraction, is that it's, to some extent, you just kind of feel like you're working on inches and getting like your turns in exactly the right order in order to work towards a predetermined victory. I don't think that's true, obviously, as far as I'm concerned, but I continue to enjoy this. I think all of the new factions just add new wrinkles to the design in a way that keeps me coming back to this again and again. That is Scythe.
I like Scythe, by the way.
That would be a first time you've ever said that in 5 years of the podcast.
Listen, I will play Scythe with you, okay? Like, remember, as your birthday wish, Scythe is way easier than that feast that you want me to swallow.
My 17th favorite game of all time is my highest game by Mac Gertz, Mr. Rondell himself. And this game does have a rondel. It's Imperial 2030. I think for many, the theme is going to be a little bit of a bummer. The theme of Imperial 2030 is that you are sort of like the power behind the throne. You are buying investments in different nations around the world and controlling the way that they build out militarily and causing wars and stuff like that, with the purpose of sort of looting their coffers. Sort of blends a Risk style game with even an 18xx sort of thing, where each country has their own bank and you're using the money in the nation's bank to improve the nation's, again, military. But you're also taking money out of the country, so you can sort of control a country, build out so it conquers its neighbors, and then strip it of everything and then leave it to someone else. And so it's quite cynical, and I think that will put people off. But the way that it combines the whole Risk thing with the economic aspect, with the 18xx owning a company thing, and the way that you want to time things so you extract the money before the game ends, all adds to a very interesting, unique game that I enjoy quite a bit. Also, again, it has the Mac Gertz rondel, and so that's sort of a trademark of his. And yes, my 17th favorite game of all time, up 3 spots from last year, Imperial 2030.
I just wish we played it more. It's like every time we go through this list, it's like, I think we could lock ourselves up for probably 2 weeks and not even make a dent in it.
Right. As you were saying all of that, Mark, like I was having the same sort of thoughts as Kellen, of just like, this reminds me of Archipelago as a game that I most want to play with the 4 of us again. Like, it's just that memory of having played it was so solid.
You know what that means? We add it to the list for Dice Tower West.
Does this list actually exist? Or is it in your mind? You're
I'm
it
going
down?
through. I'm adding everything.
I'm
like Santa Claus. I'm just adding everything to the list.
Can you show me?
Yeah, I'll show you. That's right.
No, not that. Oh.
Wow.
So for all the listeners, I just showed Kellen the list with one finger.
For those who are really curious, he made a sign with his hands and specifically one finger. And this is something that he does to me often when he doesn't like what I'm saying. And this aggression... Okay.
Will not stand.
I am moving on to my number 16th favorite board game of all time. It is a party game. And again, I wonder... why don't people like party games, right? Are they just bad people? Do they just not like to party like I like to party? Probably. This is Telestrations. This is, I think, the quintessential... It's hard because within party games, there's so many subgenres of like word party games. This is actually something that I think you could possibly play at an actual party and not a bunch of people just chilling. This is basically the old game of telephone, but injected with drawing. I think that all drawing games are attempting to be Telestrations, and all drawing games fall short of being Telestrations. I cannot think of a group that would not enjoy this unless you don't like humor. There's something universal, the shared sort of mistranslation of other people's words that has the humor just baked into the premise. Like, this is a classic gag in movies where someone says something that's translated wrong, the one word twists, and then all of a sudden you're somewhere else. And the sheer joy of that is Telestrations.
Yeah, I think you're right in that. I can't think of any group that this wouldn't be a hit with.
I think the group that it often doesn't get to be a hit with is the group that is convinced that they're not going to like it because they can't draw. And then you just have to convince them that the fact that you can't draw is not only not a negative, but it's a positive.
You're a shining star of Telestrations.
That's right.
We're lucky to have you.
The worst games I've had of Telestrations by far is when I'm playing with people who are all artistically inclined.
Yes.
Because that's the worst. Because then everybody knows exactly what every drawing is, and it gets sort of boring.
That's funny. That would be a funny way to market it. If you can draw, please don't play Telestrations.
Right.
I love that. That's really funny.
My 16th favorite game of all time is pretty timely. I feel like murder mysteries are having their day in the spotlight again. This
Not
is
by
Watson...
Glass Onion.
Yeah, I suppose. Wait, what did you just say? Not by Glass Onion?
Excuse me? This is your
Okay.
1 minute. It's counting down.
Watson Holmes is a murder mystery game. It's kind of like Consulting Detective, but what if instead of solving the mystery together, you were racing against other players to solve it? It's got this map where you're kind of bidding on locations, and only one player gets to go to each of those locations, depending on who bids the most carriage tokens. You alone, for that round at least, will get to look at the information, and then you can start to do fun little things like make it harder for other people to get there. And every location with some red herrings is revealing a part of the puzzle. And what's cool about this is that the scenarios are so cleverly designed that there are multiple routes to the problem. There are logical paths to your locations, but there are multiple ways to tackle it. So sort of seeing how everyone else got there and who was able to get there quicker and why at the end of the game is like part of the fun of just sort of unpacking what you just played. Lovely game, Watson Holmes. It continues to be a game that I feel I like a lot more than anyone else in my group, which is probably why I haven't played it in so long, but it stayed on it as high as it has because I love it so much. It's an excellent game and one of my favorites. That's Watson and Holmes.
I have said it before, but I cannot get over the feelings that this game gives you in a competitive environment. That feeling of why the is Neilan at the bank and what did he learn and should I go to the bank and follow him, and the paranoia that comes with that is really just like quite something. It's like unrivaled. It's like a feeling inside myself that like maybe Chaosmus has a little bit of that, like where have they hidden that thing? But definitely underutilized and something that you can kind of even bluff it up where there's like, the bank's an amazing place to go, and there's like nothing there. Like very funny if you're in the competitive spirit.
My 16th favorite game of all time actually shares quite a bit with Imperial 2030. I mentioned there's an 18xE part of Imperial 2030 while being sort of an area control sort of risk sort of game. City of the Big Shoulders, which is my 16th favorite game of all time, blends 18xx with more Euro design. I've talked previously about the spectrum of 18xx games where you have on one side 1830 and sort of the pure 18xx games. On the other end of the spectrum, you'd have games like City of the Big Shoulders, which are Euro games to a great extent with 18xx aspects to it. And that's one of the reasons I like it. Neilan just mentioned difficulty of getting Watson and Holmes to the table. It is hard to get City of the Big Shoulders to the table because it has a lot of like the 18xx stuff and it's a longer game. Again, this has been saved for me because there's an implementation on BGA, which is great. But I just enjoy having that 18xx feeling, that company running feeling, that stock manipulation thing that I enjoy about 18xx games while blending sort of more traditional Euro aspects that is easier to sell to people who maybe don't want to play a train game. So my 16th favorite game of all time, up 5 spots, is City of the Big Shoulders.
As we move into the top 15, usually there's not a lot of movement for me. It just so happens the games that I have played a lot of this year. I had a fantastic game of the Resistance this year, and so it moves up a few spots from last year. This is specifically the Resistance Avalon. I might be able to admit finally after 5 years that Avalon is the best way to play this, though Arturian... Why is it Arturian? It's King Arthur, right?
Is it though? I've always just said Arthurian, but maybe
I don't. I'm known to pronounce things more correctly than others. So, Resistance is the best social deduction game in the world. Neilan may have distracted you with Blood on the Clocktower, but have no fear. He's about to correct the record. Hopefully, in his number one spot. Hopefully, he has moved on from his silly need to feel extremely full. We will find out, but my 15th favorite board game of all time is the Resistance Avalon.
Yeah, I don't think it's any surprise at this point that I love the Resistance. Excellent. It will be showing up next episode, no doubt.
Mark, are you with us 100%?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, you looked frozen, so I wasn't just...
Yeah.
You love the Resistance, right?
I love the Resistance.
You couldn't get enough of it.
I couldn't get enough of it.
Yeah, but one time... You were Merlin, but you were too obvious. because you only know how to do the most optimal thing.
That's right. If I can't crunch the numbers, then I'm out.
Yeah, so it's just like Power Grid for you. It's like, why do I have to pretend like I don't know what's happening when I do know what's happening?
Yeah, exactly. Why do I have to rein myself in? I've already figured out who's going to win this game. Here's the math. Like, what are we doing?
You're wearing the hat. Why can't I use my magic powers?
My 15th favorite game of all time is up 20 spots. This is probably the biggest climber on my whole list. This is a double crossover with Kellen. This is Hansa Teutonica. Hansa Teutonica is amazing. I think the thing that I love the most about this game, which is effectively, let's call it sort of like a route building. These routes are sort of temporary, but you're trying to sort of get people in a line between two cities in order to score that city, to sort of claim some majorities on these cities along a route you're establishing. But the thing that's devious about Hansa Teutonica is that it's pure interaction. If you're not getting in someone's way every single turn, then you're playing Hansa Teutonica wrong. It's about blocking routes so that people bump you so that you get more benefit off of being in their spots in the first place. It's about balancing that with accomplishing your own goals. It's about determining what those goals are, whether it's getting more actions in the game, getting better ways to score, and sort of working between all of those competing objectives equally. It's fantastic. And some of the expansion maps, which I played for the first time in the big box version, have only deepened my love for this game. That's Hansa Teutonica, my 15th favorite game of all time.
If getting in the door takes the password El Grande, then there's a hidden keep or like sort of a separate area that all you have to say is Hansa T.
So I'm back in the club?
No, because you can't get in the door.
Damn it.
Yeah.
You might know one password. My question for you guys, and this isn't a real question, I'm just playing devil's advocate given that this is in my top 30. Are there splashy big moments in Hansa Teutonica? I find the turn-to-turn gameplay really fun. I find the systems amazing. I find the length perfect, but I don't find there being this like sort of crescendo of tension. And maybe it is a lack of the expansion maps, but I'd be curious your take on that concept.
Don't know that there are big turns in the game, which I think I would agree with you that, but I do think that the game has a natural arc to it because of the way that the scoring works, where you suddenly start to see like the doors starting to close and it just starts to feel like a panic. And I do love that crescendo, but I don't think that's exactly what you mean. But I think you're right in that it has like this uneasy tension at a constant level throughout the whole game.
That's what I would say. I don't think there are big crescendo moments, but there are definitely moments of tension along the lines of like Blue Lagoon and stuff like that, where it's like, okay, I need to stake my claim. Am I going to go for this or not? You know, like when it comes to getting the bonus points for the favorite colors, the spot in the lower left corner, and you just sort of have to commit to that. Just the moments of like commitment where you're sort of pushing your chips all in for something. And I think those are the moments that I like the most with Hansa.
Yeah, it's something that the Euroheads and the interactive heavy people can agree on. Right. But I wonder if it's like barely in that category. It's like more for the Euroheads than it is for the people who are like, let's have a fight. But again, I love it.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to always say something negative about anything that Neilan says.
Speaking of negative, I'll say something negative about my 15th favorite game of all time, and that is probably among all 50 of my favorite games of all time, this is the one that I would have the hardest time recommending. I think it's the most fragile probably of the game, and when I say not for everybody, I think it's most applicable to this game. This is Container. Container is a pretty pure economic game in a lot of respects, but it's so incremental. It's a game where you're trying to build sort of the infrastructure to build goods to sell, but everything is so incremental, and because the entire like ecosystem of the economy is among all the players, it can be quite fragile where games can sort of spin out of control really quickly. And I don't think a lot of people will really enjoy the game, but for some reason, every time I play it, I just really enjoy how weird it is for an economic game. And even the fragility, while it can cause like really some stinkers, can also just be like really interesting for me, and a game that I've enjoyed every time I've played it, including a game we had a couple years ago with Quinns and Tom that was really fun. And yeah, just again, a tough game to recommend, but if you're into weird economic games, I think Container is up there, and that's my 15th favorite game of all time, up 8 spots from last year.
I think, funnily, similar to what Kellen was saying about Blood Rage, is that it was actually that game of it that basically took Container from being a game that I was really compelled by to one that was like, I don't know about this. And that's not to blame Tom, who I think had fun in that game, but something about the way that the ecosystem just completely derailed just made me, that fragility you're talking about. It feels a little bit, this is going to come out weird, but it feels like close to like a role-playing experience where you just don't know what you're going to get and you just have to roll with it. That's to say that is not even remotely what Container is, but something about it just kind of feels a little bit more freewheely to me in a way that feels too loose for my taste.
I get that. I definitely get that.
And then for me, explicitly combining what Neilan said with the fact that each color is worth a different amount to each person at the end of the game, it's just like, oh, the market on reds got as a result of an idiot over there who doesn't know how to produce things, and now I have no 10s that I can get, which is like, to Neilan's point, you have to be more in it for the experience of trying to overcome that opaqueness instead of being hyper-focused on being like a competitive bastard, which is what I assume the game wanted me to do.
Right. And I think that the fact that it still is opaque for me, like, I think this game would drop dramatically if I was playing it solely or primarily with people who are really good at it, because I think I would be crushed into oblivion, and I think it would make for a much worse experience. But every time I've played it, I have not had a grasp of like the ideal way to play, and I've played with people who are in the same boat, so it's made for like a more of experimental experience than anything else. But yeah, I get that for sure.
My 14th favorite board game of all time has not moved from last year. This comes to us from one of my favorite board game publishers, Small Box Games. This is Omen, A Reign of War. If you have enjoyed Radlands, probably the most recent example of a prominent two-player dueler, you would love Omen, A Reign of War, and I encourage you to seek it out. This game has some of the best artwork I've ever seen in a board game that transports me to this world where every mechanism is just a little bit different than you think it should be or that you've played in past games. The economy of the game is confusing, whether you want cards or coins. The achievement system allows for a different type of gameplay than just attack all hills and try to win on them. The turn-to-turn gameplay is like, okay, instead of just trying to win, I'm now trying to have a spirit in each region on the map, which is suboptimal to just winning the conflicts. Just a Magic-like dueling game that every time you ask the question, like, how should this work? It works just a little bit different and in a wrinkle, in a way that all of the small box games sort of do for me. But this one is approachable and lovely. A game I could never see myself getting rid of.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the Magic comparison, because this is always the game that I'm most excited to show to Magic players, because it's just that little bit, hey, what if you took what you love about that game, made it slightly weirder, but we just put it into like a small box and could have a great time with it, and it's fantastic.
Hey, you guys up here, everyone's hyped about Mindbug, and I'm like, have you even played Omen, bro? That's what I have to say to all the people that are in this club. They've got past the first layer, they're in the trap dungeon with Hansa T. There's probably a container speakeasy off to the side. You have to say container to get into. And deep within that realm, there are people talking about Mindbug, and they are wrong.
My 14th favorite game of all time is the game that Kellen doesn't like me to call an auction game, but this is my favorite Reiner Knizia game. This is Taj Mahal. It is a double crossover with Kellen, though. It is a hand management forward game for the most part, where you are planning out, you effectively see 12 lots that are in front of you on this map, and sort of planning out when you're going to utilize cards in order to grab the things that you need from each of those auctions down the line is the most important thing. But on any given round of the game, you are effectively bidding on multiple fronts, and you sort of look at the cards in your hand and you go, okay, I think I could win this, or I could win this. But you're competing around the table, and if the turn gets back to you and you are still in the lead on any given bid, you can just pull out and say, that's it, I'm happy with that. Or you can stick in and sort of go head-to-head with someone that might be sort of trying to angle for something you're going for. But the thing that's so harsh about Taj Mahal is you may be setting up multiple turns for something you very specifically need 5 rounds from now, and then Kellen just sort of comes in and beats you on elephants and is the worst. But that, again, it's a sort of game where your best-laid plans go awry and having to pivot is everything. Taj Mahal, very harsh game that I love.
Fantastic. You're a beautiful person.
Thank you.
I appreciate Taj Mahal so much, and I think it's a great design, but for some reason, that thing you were talking about where your best laid plans can come asunder happens to me every time in Taj Mahal. This is clearly, and as terrible as it is for me to say, like, this is definitely a case where the fact that I'm so bad at it knocks it for me because I just cannot grok it. I just cannot get the game.
You'd think with all the poker that you've been playing in Vegas,
Yeah.
you would have up-leveled those skills by now.
The problem is there's no elephant on the cards in the casinos here, and so I just don't get it. It doesn't translate for me because I don't see them. I'm like, wait, where are the elephants? Where are the other things?
Sure, the dealers appreciate it when you ask about that.
Yeah. Big fans. My 14th favorite game of all time is down one spot, but it is my highest rated Knizia game. This is, in my opinion, his greatest design. It is Tigris and Euphrates. Neilan mentioned earlier the game he designed sort of as an offshoot to Tigris and Euphrates, which is Yellow and Yangtze, which many people prefer because it sort of smooths things out and adds power, stuff like that. And I enjoy Yellow and Yangtze, but Tigris and Euphrates, for me, I enjoy the rough edges for Tigris and Euphrates. It can put people off because when you have battles, when you have conflicts, in Tigris and Euphrates, it can feel quite harsh, but that's one aspect I like about it. I think the powers in Yellow and Yangtze sort of detract from the purity of Tigris and Euphrates, and that's something I enjoy. I enjoy the fact that it feels like a game that is a little timeless. It feels like in the same way that chess does, where there are random elements, and I know people can be put off by the way that the tiles can be drawn in Tigris and Euphrates, but there is something, and again, a lot of people have problems with Knizia's theming, but I think that the theme of like civilizations battling each other across this like ancient land really accentuates the timelessness and the chess abstract quality of Tigris and Euphrates, and that's why I really enjoyed 14th favorite game of all time, down one spot, Tigris and Euphrates.
This is one that you also can't speak no evil about. So once you're past the opening door and you're down in the club,
right?
You know, there's a dungeon of people saying Tigris and pots or whatever, and they think they're very cool. And they are. They're very cool. I'm just not good at it. My 13th favorite game is a double crossover with Neilan, but it does scare me. It does scare me because of all the hatred for one Inish, a fantastic area control game that combines really the best card drafting. Let's say that. Let's put this on the box. The best card drafting in all of board gaming. Done. Full stop. End of sentence. Because there are so few cards, this is not the case for Blood Rage, where you're playing a memory game of who can know all the cards. Everyone knows the cards, and you can effectively hate draft in the right situation. Inish is fantastic. It is wildly swingy and silly with the epic cards, which I think is something that people don't like. And then the other thing people don't like is obviously the variable game length, or VBL. No, that's not right. I wanted to say VBR because I like VBR, but variable game length would be VGL for short. And obviously, Mark will edit that, so this sounds like something that I planned. The VGL of Inish is too high for someone like Mark.
I think that small card set gets to the heart of exactly why Inish is so solid. Knowing that if you haven't seen a card that someone at the table has it, and like trying to suss out who that person is and when they're going to use the dice against you, for instance, is so beautiful.
Sorry that you have such a stomach sensitivity to VGR. No, VGL. God damn it, Mark. You're kind of a colicky. You know?
I remember when I took my allergy test as a young kid and I saw that I was deathly allergic to VGR or VGL or whatever the hell you just said.
Say it right, Mark.
It broke my heart.
My 13th favorite game of all time is Alchemists. This hasn't moved much since last year. In fact, I think it's the same spot. Alchemists, it's not a pure deduction game, but it's my favorite game that utilizes deduction. It's kind of married with a very interesting worker placement system where you're effectively bidding on how early you can go in the round, and that can be a huge fundamental difference. There's nothing that feels worse in a game of Alchemists about saying, I'm going to go later, and then finding that all the ingredients you wanted are gone, or all the people that you needed to sell potions to have already had their needs met. It's a game about acquiring ingredients, creating potions, but crucially, it's about figuring out exactly what the properties of the ingredients are, and you kind of do this through this repeated experimentation. It's sort of app supported, so you're going to check your results against the app, and it's going to tell you a little bit about what the properties of that ingredient are over the course of time. So you're slowly figuring out what the ingredients are while trying to publish your results faster than other players. Very unique game, Alchemists.
And this is by the designer of Deal with Devil, which is the latest hot.
Yes, which I'm very excited to play in the near future.
Yeah, I saw that in your house when I broke in.
Nice.
For the America check, and I wanted to take it, and then I didn't. So, you're welcome.
Thank you for not stealing from my house.
Okay, my 13th favorite game of all time is the one appearance of an 18XX game, and this is going to be 1830, Railways and Robber Barons. I just want to read the first line of description for 1830 on BGG, which I think is one of the worst lines of all time to introduce people to the game. 1830 is one of the most famous 18XX games. One of the things some gamers like about this game is that the game has no chance element. That is to say, if players wish to play two games with the same moves, the outcome would also be the same. So that's terrible. I don't know why that's the first line. But for me, this is a game that when I got into board games and I saw this whole 18XX thing and I didn't really get it and I thought it was some like enclave that I could never be a part of and it was just like a weird thing that I would never play until a friend of mine said, hey, let's just go for it. Let's just try it. And really opened my eyes to a lot of the interesting aspects of 1830 that make it a unique genre and really isn't as mythical and hard to get into as you might think based on how tight the 18XX community is. It is long and that's difficult to get it to the table, but the shared aspect of the economic stock manipulation, which is something I like, the interactivity of it, which I love, and even the spatial aspect where you're trying to build your track out, and that's another very interesting thing where you have that Blue Lagoon-y sort of thing where like I need to get to this spot and I want to make sure nobody cuts me off. Just all adds up for a really fun experience that I think is unique to board games. Really need to play 18 Chesapeake, which I think is a more approachable, if my understanding is correct, and quicker experience. So need to play that. We're going to add it to the list of games at Dice Tower West. But yeah, 1830 is my 18XX game of choice. And number 13 on my list, down 3 spots because I haven't had a chance to play it, but really want to again.
Hopefully this one doesn't get canceled by Netflix. My number 12 favorite board game of all time is new to the list for me, and I wish I could say that it was old. This is a Sashi and Sashi card game. This is what I will say, I will call it my arboretum, my white whale of a devilish card game that has been with me all of this past year at every convention I've been to. I've taken it. This is Wine the Film. You can find it now as Photograph from Matago Games. This is a thinky, weird, small box card game that you could probably teach to just about anyone, but has a lot of depth to it. Specifically, the sort of first, last, well, how do these hops go? First in, last out, or last in, first out, Neilan? It is first in, last out. No, yeah. Last out, first in. As in, you pick up cards, they go to one side of your hand, and you can never rearrange the cards in your hand. And the amount of cards that you pick up is the same amount of cards that you must play into your tableau from the other side of your hand. So every turn, it is an agonizing decision between picking up a lot of things that you feel like you need, and then realizing that you're going to sort of bust if your cards are not in the right order on the other side of your hand. Mark, have you had a chance to play this yet? You'll love it.
Yes, we played it together, in fact. How quickly we forget at Shucks.
When did we play it together?
Shucks.
Oh, we were at Shucks, and you said, wow, I love this. This is better than Arboretum. Is that what I heard you say?
I said part of it. I said wow, I love it part, but I didn't say the rest of it.
I forgot we played, but I distinctly remember you saying that. I think we were on the back patio, and you said those words to me. This is as good or better than Arboretum.
We were sipping that lemonade that Quinn's had made us, that homemade lemonade, that special recipe he had.
Yes.
Yeah, we were on the back porch in Vancouver, and we were playing it, and I said the first part of that, I love this game, but I didn't say anything else.
Yeah.
So you remember most of that memory.
Yeah. And then we all started chanted first in, last out together.
Yeah.
First in,
why did we do that again? I can't remember why we started. Yeah. But no, kidding aside, I really did enjoy this. It did not make my list, but I think with more plays, like it's inevitable that it'll be up there for me. I really enjoyed it. It has like all that hand management stuff that I really enjoy, small rule set, all that stuff. Loved it. Did definitely love it.
My 12th favorite game of all time is just down a couple of spots out of my top 10. It's funny, I have like one-line notes for all of the games on my list, and this one is just in all caps, says, splashy, big plastic, throw lots of dice. That is Cthulhu Wars. Cthulhu Wars is probably the best implementation of like large-scale asymmetry that I can think of in a Troops on the Map game, which is to say that Every faction feels radically different from every other faction, but there are still lots of asymmetries even within a single faction. There are multiple ways to build depending on the spell books you unlock and which order you do them, which is two conflicting things, the goals that you're working towards and the abilities that you're unlocking. And I think that is just such a clever way to handle multiple different approaches to each faction. It is a big, lavish production with lots of big, bright plastic moving across this very cool looking board. Combat boils down to just throwing a ton of dice, and if I haven't said this enough before, that actually ends up mitigating a lot of the luck in the game in a way that kind of balances out on the whole. Very cool game, very splashy, lots of big turns in a game of Cthulhu Wars. My 12th favorite game of all time.
What a good choice, and what a hard game to recommend with the company that puts it out.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
My 12th favorite game of all time is, I promised, the last trainee game on my list. This is Age of Steam. It is down one spot from last year. Age of Steam has the geographic thing that I was talking about with 1830, where you're building track, but that tightness of track building is even more accentuated. There isn't any of the economic manipulation that you have with 1830, the stock manipulation, but it is a much tighter game in general. I say in general because there are hundreds at this point, hundreds of maps, each with their own sort of take on the way the game is played. I've been fortunate enough to play a couple of maps in the last year or so, and has sort of grown my appreciation for what Age of Steam can be. This is a design by Martin Wallace, one of my favorite designs, not my favorite design, but one of my favorite designs from Wallace and John Borer, and scratches that track building itch for me, and that trying to figure out how to send goods from one spot to another, which is not something you get with 1830. This is about delivering goods from one city to another with your track, but in a thankfully shorter time span. And again, there's so many maps that you can really adjust for tightness and for length depending on what map you play. And so, yeah, it's the flexibility of Age of Steam and the much shorter time frame that makes me enjoy it quite a bit. So this is my 12th favorite game of all time, down one spot.
Is there like a Train Gamers society that is rolling over right now because you put Age of Steam like above 1830?
I don't think so. I think
how dare they?
There are definitely societies, Train Gamer societies for sure, but I think half of them are rolling over in the graves and half of them are ecstatic because I think there is a very strong Age of Steam faction and a very strong 18xx faction, and I think half the crowd is going to be cheering that.
You chose a side.
I chose a side.
Okay, I like that. That says a lot about you.
That's right. I don't waffle about. I make a decision. Unlike some people here.
What? I don't know who's that directed at.
Think about it.
I can't.
Look in your heart, and then you'll know. This is the time to contemplate.
All right. My number 11 favorite board game of all time invented hops, and that is Coloretto. This is a card game that I still think is probably my most played game of all time, playing it hundreds of times over the years. Just a fantastic game that works really well at 2 and has variable scoring that changes just a little bit of the flow of this. I don't know if Neilan has not yet put it on his list. I hope it has not fallen off of his list. Coloretto, it's not a showy game. It's not a game that will, and even something like Wind the Film, another card game, right, that I just mentioned, is a little bit more showy. Coloretto is just like meat and potatoes. It's got everything that you need. It's a balanced meal. Just fantastic. Something I could never part with, Coloretto.
Coloretto had been the mainstay on my list for like every year that we've done this. It was always close to the bottom, and it has just slipped off this year. But
don't eat potatoes. You don't need nutrients.
Yeah, that is not to belie anything about how fantastic a game Coloretto is. Like dead simple and an excellent game to break out in almost any context.
And I think that this could be the easiest example of how we do these top 50s just a little bit differently. Because I feel like if you had to reduce your collection to 20, you would be gutted to not have Coloretto in it. Even, you know what I mean? Like from a variety, like you can't have as many sort of, I don't know. Anyway, something that maybe illustrates a little bit of a difference there, even because I know you love it. I know you love your hops.
For sure.
No one can take them away from you.
I have a beer in my fridge that's gifted to me by our friend Brandon that the label is simply called Hops Are Not Real. That makes me laugh every time I see it.
Oh my God.
That's funny.
My 11th favorite game of all time, much like Age of Steam, is definitely a single game with lots of maps. This is Exit the Game. Exit is...
He's trying to slip that in there.
This is the one that I get a lot of flack for not actually being a single game, but like it's a series, it's a game system. But the Exit games are effectively escape rooms in a box. They are a fantastic little box in every single iteration of very cool, inventive puzzles. I will say that the shine is starting to wear a little bit because every now and again you come across a box, and this has become increasingly true as the series has gone longer in the tooth, where you kind of feel like you've seen the puzzles before. Sometimes you just get a box that just feels like a dud. And unfortunately, one of the ones I was most looking forward to this year, the Lord of the Rings box, kind of felt like that to me. But then that said, they've been doing these advent calendars for the last couple of years, which absolutely, completely reinvigorate my love for how fantastic and how clever the puzzle design in these games is. That's 24 little puzzles you just open up in the month of December. It's one of the highlights of my year, quite genuinely, because it's just like a fun little experience. It's like a new, unique, interesting puzzle to solve every single day. Absolutely recommend the advent calendars. That is Exit the Game.
I got a bougie coffee advent calendar, and I'd like to change my number 11. That's actually my 11th favorite board game of all time, is that Onk's Coffee advent calendar that I got this year.
My 11th favorite game of all time sort of contradicts what I said about my number 14th favorite game of all time, Tigris and Euphrates. I talked about how I prefer Tigris and Euphrates to Yellow and Yangtze because it's the de-Eurification version. My 11th favorite game of all time, down 8 spots, is Caylus 1303. Caylus 1303 is a more Eurified version of the original Caylus, which was a sort of like very stark worker placement game. Caylus 1303 introduces powers, introduces some variable setup stuff, introduces a lot of stuff that you see in modern Euros. But I think the changes that were made in Caylus 1303 improve on the original, and Caylus has been knocked off my list now for a couple of years because I prefer 1303. I think the changes that they made, for the most part, there's a couple things that I miss from the original Caylus, but most of the changes have been quality of life / quality of game changes that have made the game much better. The variable setup allows for the inability to sort of stick to strategies that you could do with Caylus. Now you have to take the board orientation into account, and the fact that it did away with money and it streamlined the game, which for as stark as Caylus was, it did sometimes run a little long. Caylus 1303 improves on, again, most of Caylus, while keeping the thing that I love about Caylus, and I cannot end this without talking about the Provost, which is when you're building your worker placement spots in Caylus, you build them out and you pay for them in advance, but they will only fire off if they are behind the Provost, which is a piece that marks the line of demarcation where everything in front of it will activate and everything behind it won't. And the fact that you and your opponents can manipulate where the Provost is, and you can even negotiate, hey, don't pay for moving the Provost. I need to make sure the spot fires off. And there's even the table talk aspect that you don't get in a lot of worker placement games. And just when you do move the Provost and cost somebody who's invested a worker and time and all this stuff, and just you move it so that it doesn't fire off, it's like one of the most brutal / fun moments you can have in board games. And my greatest memory of losing a board game took place with Caylus of 1303 at Dice Tower West a couple years ago with Kellen and Neilan. It is my greatest moment of losing a game. I will not recount the story, but it's my greatest loss ever. And so if a game can give me my greatest loss ever, it deserves to be on my list. Number 11, Caylus 1303, down 8 spots.
I wish 1303 was on Board Game Arena, because when I've gone back to Caylus the couple of times I have on BGA, I'm reminded about how much I prefer 1303. So yeah, I'd love to see that make its way onto there at some point.
You guys are just on BGA all the time. No one's inviting me to this thing.
You've been invited. And then the game never starts because Kellen never checks in.
Neilan has played multiple games of Caylus on BGA, and I've never even heard about it.
And with that, we are done for this week's episode of the show. Those are our 20th to 11th favorite games of all time, which means there's just one more episode of this series, our top 10 favorite games of all time, coming at you next week. Please look forward to that. In the meantime, you can catch us on all of our social media, whether that's on Twitter, whether that's on Facebook, or better yet, come hang out in our Discord. This is a online chat room you can use on your phone or on your PC. That is at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. We're in there talking about board games all of the time. If you have any contention with any of the games on our list, this is the place to air it and sort of have your thoughts either sort of met with agreement or
shot down mercilessly.
Yes, exactly, by the other fine members of our community. That's at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. Thank you, as always, to Heart Society for our intro and outro music, What's in Your Mind, Kid? Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye. Certainly, and so some of that is on me to get good, as the kids say.
Back to you, Kellen.
Sorry, I thought you were gonna.
Oh, I could do.
It's sort of like whenever I would speak, a little like a trumpet. Da, 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 da.
Yeah. Presenting Kellen Laker.
Oh, now I feel like an because it gets out of the way and is so like short.
Yeah,
quickly.
right. Sure.
It's Neilan, not me, right?
It is you.
It is you.
Oh, I guess I hadn't heard the trumpet.
Oh, my bad.
That's a Kellen trumpet. That's
No, I need
in my head. That's what a Kellen trumpet sounds.
That's a Lord Farquaad trumpet. That sucks. Of course, you'd say that's a Kellen trumpet. What a terrible thing to say to someone.
That's a solid game as well, for sure.
That's what they call. What is that thing where you have sex with a dead person?
Yep.
Necrophilia?
Yeah,
That's what they call necrophilia.
that's Neilan.
That is our
That's
first
me.
ever reference to necrophilia. Listeners may have thought we've done that before, but that is breaking new ground, as Kellen is wont to do.
Hopefully not the last. Mark, tell us about number 20.
So